there, Dagna here with Mindful Dev, place where you can get tailored advice for your software engineering career. Today we'll be talking about the disparity between the pay for US-based software developers versus the developers based in EU. I have been fortunate enough to be able to compare the two markets because I was born and raised in Poland. I also got my degree in education there and my job, and then I ended up moving to United States, and I was fortunate to have a developer's job here in United States. Okay, in Poland, when I got my first job as a software engineer, I was essentially making a good amount for for the cost of living in Poland. However, the money that I made in my very first job, entry-level job for a software engineer back in Poland, in an hourly comparison, was as much as a McDonald's worker makes here in North Carolina. And that was really startling. The disparity is huge. In United States, you have some states where developers right out of college start with a six-figure salary, right? And why is that? How come the salaries in Europe, in European Union, are much, much lower comparing to the salaries of software developers here in the United States? One thing to consider is how much you have to invest in order to gain that education. You see, both European Union's market is fairly closed off, as well as US market is fairly closed off. And if you're not already a citizen of one or the other, what you have to do is get a visa or marry a citizen and get some resident or citizenship rights through your marriage. So let's consider, though, the difference between acquiring the skill set. In European Union, my case Poland, education was free. So essentially there was no tuition for me to attend a university, and I got both bachelor's and master's degree in control automation and robotics, and I didn't have to pay for it. In fact, my university paid me a stipend, and I was able to use that to pay for some of my expenses. In United States, however, if you want to become a software engineer and you elect to choose a 4-year college degree, more often than not, you have to pay more than $50,000 in tuition for your school. And the numbers vary by the school that you end up going to, but essentially the US market has to account for that if they are hiring a college graduate who has a 50, 100K loan, a student debt, that they have to be able to pay it off and still have a good living. That's the reason why the salaries in the US market for software developers are much more elevated in comparison to the ones in European Union. So education, paying for education, is definitely one of the reasons why software developers in the States make so much more money. The second thing is because there's just much more successful startups and successful companies, and the barrier to entry to a market are significantly lower, the companies are able to succeed at a much faster rate than companies back in European Union. I mean, let's consider this. United States uses English, and whether you work in one state or another, the communication barriers pretty much doesn't exist, and there's a lot of common grounds in terms of culture, in terms of using the same products, using them the same way, whereas in European Union, you have all these different countries and different languages that create barriers. So if you create a company in European Union, you're most likely not going to be able to scale as much and grow as much and create income comparing to those US-based companies. It's just a scale effect of being able to communicate in one language and use one culture. And that then scales down to being able to pay higher salaries too, because if you're a successful company, you got the money to pay salaries. If you are growing very slowly, then most likely you don't have as much money to pay out in salaries. And that's the reason why companies in the States are more successful most of the time, or it's easier for them to grow and be successful. Okay, so now we know that education in Europe is way cheaper just because there's no tuition. And the success rate of American companies is way higher because there's way less barriers of entry for companies to start, operate, and grow with a scale. Now, how about combining getting that education in European Union and moving to United States to get that high software developer's salary? Here's a caveat that I want to explain based on a question that my recent career coaching client had to ask. He was essentially saying, Dagna, I've been applying to American companies and I have a good amount of experience. I'm really good at what I do and my resume shows that, yet I somehow cannot find a way to even get into an interview. So he sent me a few listings that he applied for, and essentially the listings say all remote. So you would think, okay, if it's all remote, then I can be located anywhere in the world and I can still apply to get that position as a software engineer in the United States. Except, unfortunately, that is not the case, as my client unfortunately found out. What happens is, for the company to be able to pay you, you have to have an address and a taxpayer ID in United States. Then you can be located anywhere in the world and that company will be able to pay you out your salary as long as you have an address, you're eligible to work in United States, and you pay taxes in United States. Now, all remote essentially means that you can do your job from whenever in the world. So let's say you have an address in Austin, Texas, but you live in Thailand. Sure, possible, probable if the company supports all remote. Now, if you are a Europe-based or wherever-based programmer, it's really hard to get into those American companies unless they provide visas. You need to have a visa, or you could try to work as a contractor because you won't be able to become an employee of that particular company unless you have that eligibility to work in the United States. So it's not about you that you suck as a developer, absolutely not. Being rejected by American companies that don't sponsor visas means that they don't want to sponsor visas and they don't consider you as a candidate because you don't meet the eligibility criteria. If you're considering on making move from EU to US, there are a few ways that you can achieve that. Number one, apply for a job that lists that the visa sponsorship is available. Number two, apply for a job in an international company that is around your area where you could start working because you're eligible right now, and then make sure that they have offices located in different places around the globe. So for example, if you were to start working at Google, you could potentially work there for a few years and then move on to a different branch that's located in a different part of the world. Or you could apply for a college education in United States, and while being here on a student visa and studying, you could try to look for a job and then hopefully get a visa through your job. It's much easier than applying remotely. Reason being, the company can just see you, get in touch with you, they can fly you over for an interview, and it's just much easier that way. Or if you happen to fall in love with someone who happens to have the citizenship and in the meantime tie the knot, then congratulations, that's also a way to get into United States. Now, I wouldn't bank on that because you cannot really plan where your heart, for whom your heart beats anyway. But what you could plan on is what kind of company to apply on. So here are your tips on how to get into US market and enjoy that high software developers pay from United States. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, you like what you hear, you can subscribe down below and you'll be notified every single time I upload a new video. Again, thanks for watching. Talk to you next time. Cheers to your success in making that move.